Well, I guess we'll start with Travis. I mean, can you give us a backstory on your guys' relationship and how, this came to be for you?
Yeah, I've known Travis since 2016 in spring training, when I was with the Padres, and we were both kind of competing, I guess, for the fifth outfield spot with under new manager Andy Green, and we ended up being kind of grouped together during different, practice sessions, outfield work, and obviously in the base running kind of station. So got to know him pretty well there. And then I retired or quit, however you want to play it out, but that's kind of what happened. And then I ended up being a special advisor or senior advisor in San Diego. And part of the job was to go into triple A, double A, single A, and kind of mentor some of the not only coaches, but the players. And Travis, Austin Hedges, Hunter Renfro, those kind of top prospects in triple A were there. And I spent some time with Travis and those guys there, and that's how the relationship started. And then fast forward, ended up being Travis' first base coach, outfield coach a year or so later. And then we started forming kind of this, not only a coach player friendship, but like a real true friendship in those years. And then we kept in contact, still today. So Travis is one of my favorite teammates, players I've ever coached, just because of the man who he is and what he represents. I've always thought in back of my head, when Travis does decide to retire, like I always thought he would be just an incredibly impactful coach, just because of how he sees relationships and how he sees the game is very similar to me. So I took a shot at this one this year to see where he was at, and I had to convince him that this was the spot and this was the time to do it. And luckily, we have him on board. So it's a huge hire for us. The relationships he already has in the clubhouse, the relationships he has with me. Rod Barajas was one of his coaches before as well. So there's a lot of built-in relationships that I'm excited for him to have and to really jumpstart his career with a lot of the guys that he won a World Series with.
And one more, I guess, for me, with two of the holdovers you have in Teagues and Dave Bush, and with Mike leaving, I mean, what went into the process of, trying to maintain how good this pitching staff was last year and looking on how to kind of keep that going?
Yeah, one more thing on Trav. I'm not calling him El Blondie, so I don't know where that whole thing is, but you guys can call him that. I refuse to call him that. So he is going to be not called that in my. So any other interview, you'll never hear that from me. If he third persons that, I'm going to have an issue also if he calls himself El Blondie. So I just want to go ahead and throw that out there. The pitching side, yeah, Jordan Teagues, I think is an enormous hire for our organization, him being in the number one slot. And this guy is really, really good. I know a lot of people don't know who he is. The industry, the baseball industry, as far as like the coaches and front offices, absolutely know who this guy is. Our players were really impacted in a positive way through Jordan. And I thought Mike honestly was really good for Jordan. I think he learned a lot, not only in the meetings, but how to talk to players, during a full 162 and how to interact with them and keep them always upbeat and positive. I think Mike was huge in his development. Yeah, and Mike decided to move on, and he was um, he's afforded to do that. That's part of the business. But luckily we got Jordan and Bushy still stayed on. They were a huge part of that pitching department last year, and then Colby Suggs, I identified right away as soon as he became a free agent. He had a lot of opportunity other places, and very grateful that he decided to pick the Texas Rangers to be part of his. Sorry, I got two labs that are barking. That part of his decided. Sorry, that were he could have went on to, but now he is with us, and I think he's a needle mover. He's young. He's innovative, but he also pitched at a high level in college and was very successful in the bullpens in Minnesota, and a fantastic hire. I'm very grateful for that one.
Thanks, Skip.
You got it.
Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Skip. I guess kind of going off that, when you're building a staff, how do you balance and navigate bringing in new faces, retaining faces? Obviously trying to, bring in the people you want, people you believe can help, and also not disrupting kind of the flow of things from previous years. What is that balance like on your end when you are building a staff and trying to get this going?
Yeah, luckily I had a lot of this year I got to talk with a lot of the current coaches or the coaches last year that were on the staff, had an idea of, their personalities and, what they, how they impacted the players in a positive and negative way. I also interviewed a lot of them this off season to make sure that they were still a fit here and to where we want to go. The feedback from our core players was incredibly positive on all the guys that I just mentioned, including Justin Veely, obviously Pipe, the guys that are coming back, Hayes. But I think Jordan Teagues, in large, was like we have to we have to keep this guy. That is for sure. So it made all the conversations I've had with him a much easier decision. And I think it's important to hire internally too, and guys that know what the Texas Rangers mean. Having that uniform on really, really means to them. And Travis is obviously one of them. Teagues obviously has an idea of what this looks like up and down the system. And we're not done hiring yet. We still have another position that we got to fill, but I think that was really important to not only interview the guys we currently have, but also guys that are in the system as well, give them a fair shot.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Stephen.
Skip, you just mentioned obviously there's still one more hire. I'm assuming that's another hitting instructor. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. We're trying to figure out the number three or another guy in the hitting department. I don't really like saying it's a number one, two, or three. Although JV is going to be leading the department, I think JV is going to be really, really good. And it just really starting his career as a number one hitting coach and having his voice be heard and it was super important to me because I don't think he was you really saw the best version of him just yet, and I think you're going to see it this year. I think he's going to be an excellent hitting coach for a lot of years here. The number three is going to be numbered. We can go a number of different ways. I think it was important for me to have a guy that understands the game planning, understands the swing and the biomechanics, but also has really good feel and it has a relation can be able to talk to the player. It's not just like numbers, numbers, numbers. Like there's going to be some feel to this and also be aligned on how we see this offense moving going forward, and also be aligned up and down with the hitting coordinators and the director of hitting in the minor leagues to make sure that we're all on the same page is really important to us.
The other question I'll have now that you've got pretty much the coaching staff in play, and I mean, while you were aware of the players that you have, how much now are you actually starting to reach out and communicate and get more in depth with the players that you have?
Yeah, I will say I've met with a lot of guys already. I've had face-to-face time, and whether it was lunches or dinners or going to their house already. A lot of phone calls for sure. I really respect guys off season, so I'm not trying to dive into their world and mess up their carpool and all that stuff. I understand families with kids and their off seasons are really, really important. But I also think it's important for them to understand who I am, and I have to understand who they are, what went right, what went wrong, and so we can really figure this thing out in the off season and not try to find out who they are in the during spring training. So those conversations are continuing. I'm almost at the finish line with like the 40-man roster, but I think the core guys I've met with already, and it's been really healthy.
All right, thanks, Skip.
You got it.
Jeff.
Hey, Skip, on
on Travis and the quick transition from player to coach, or you know whatever's next in baseball. Um, how hard is it to do that since you've done it?
Yeah, I think the toughest part is spring training, because when you show up at spring training as a player, everything is like, here you go, here's the itinerary, and we have station, A, B, and C for you. This is what your day looks like, and you show up and you just put your best effort, whatever the coach has there for you. Trying to have a 15 to 20-minute station every single day for the outfielders was challenging. Trying to figure out how to get base running stations for 30 straight days is challenging. Because during a season, you know how batting practice works, and you can individualize stuff, and you have a smaller group. And the work is much easier because you're diving in on that night's pitcher, trying to dissect him to get the best tips and tells, and then you have 4 or 5 outfielders that you can work with and trying to get them better. So I had John Jay. I just did it with him in Miami. Travis is feel very similar personality wise, as far as like they're all in grinders. They will figure out what they don't know right away. Like I'm excited where Travis is at, because it reminded me a lot of John Jay, fresh out of the game. Uh, did The game was not easy for him, so they had to work. He had to win on the margins and try to figure out how to survive at the major league level. And typically, those are the best coaches. And that's how I was too. It was hard for me initially, and it started in spring training. But then by the time the end of spring training, I felt like I had an idea of how I wanted this department to work and to be ran. Also, he's going to have some guys around him that he knows, and Griffin Benedict, who is going to be one of our bullpen catchers, but he's going to be in charge of the tips and tells also in that department. Rags was really good at the base running, so he has some guys next to him that will really help him move this thing forward. But I want him to make it how he wants it and not how I want it, right? I want it to be his department. We've had some really good conversations about it already, but to answer your first question in a long-winded answer, I think a lot of it was that the toughest part was spring training initially, because there's just so many people you're trying to figure out how to get each one of them better is challenging.
Were you ever like, I'm better than this guy? Why am I not playing?
He might, because he just got out of it. I definitely was not that. So I was ready to move on at 35, 36 years old, whatever I was. It was, the game told me it was over. Where he could probably get another job this year and probably play at the major league level. So much different scenario from him and where I was in my career. But that's why this was such a huge hire for me, because he's so relevant. And I think a lot of the guys will latch on to him pretty quick.
Okay, then what about Jordan? With all the time he spent as the pitching coordinator, and the fact that you guys might have some young guys, and the work he did with Jack in 23 and 24, how important is it to have for those young guys to be able to go, oh hey, there's our guy?
Very important. I had conversations with the young guys. I had conversations with the old guys before we made this hire. And that was important to me, to see what kind of relationship that he had with the young guys and with the older guys. That it's not all about us, right? It's about what the player needs and wants, and how they want to get better, and who do they think can help them get better. And I'm telling you, his name was the one that was brought up. And so that's why I think those conversations were needed. I had to ask before we made this hire. Obviously, the front office, loved him. I didn't really know Jordan too much. Remember, I'm only there 3 or 4 days, 5 days out of the month. So I really wanted to understand who he was as a person, and then what his, non-negotiables were. And it was a no-brainer hire for me.
Okay, thank you.
Got it.
Sean, do you have another one for Skip?
Yeah, just real quick, Skip. What made Alex Centrone a good fit for that hitting job?
Yeah, I've known Alex now for a couple years. In Miami, when we signed Yuli, I reached out to Alex and just wanted to understand, where Yuli was at in his career, what he needed to work on. what kind of, clubhouse presence he was. And that's when it really started our conversations. And it went from just asking about Yuli to like, you know, an hour and a half conversation, and then I met him in spring training when we were in Miami, and he was, down the road, down the street. And so those conversations just kept happening as I came into town and would meet with him. And then my bench coach, Luis, is a manager right now in the DR, and so is Alex. They formed a really good relationship as well. So the conversation started, right away. I made sure JV, started talking with him, how, made him comfortable with him. And JV right away said, like, this is our guy, we got to figure out a way to get him. Alex has a pretty nice resume. He has a couple World Series over there. He developed some really young players into some pretty good big leaguers right now, big league hitters. He had the ear of some really good guys over in Houston that I trust when talking to a couple of the former players over there. So you do your homework and you do your background. You just don't, pick out of a hat. And that's really important to me to understand how the construction of a major league coaching staff also works, and not just the construction of a major league lineup works, right? Like I need to understand how the whole dynamic works. Does he play well in the sandbox with others? Is it all about him? Does he have ego? And then what does that look like, in a cage, because the hitting coach, that is not a fun job at all. I don't think they love it. I don't know how they love it so much because it is hard. But he has a passion for hitting, and I'm really excited that he's on board.
Thanks, Skip.
You got it.
All right. If there are no more questions for Skip, we'll give him the opportunity to cut off the Zoom here. And we appreciate it, Skip. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the kind words, Skip.
Good luck, Travis.
I know that hurts to say good things about me, but thank you.
Yeah, this last time you hear it. See ya.
I'm glad I got to hear that.
We'll move on to questions for Travis. Go ahead, Stephen.
Travis, we feel like you should be pinch running or something from first base, right?
Well, I might try and steal a few reps on there. I feel like I can still get it.
So talk about how the conversation went when he first approached you about doing this.
Yeah, so Skip called me. I wouldn't say it was out of the blue. Skip and I, like he said, we have a good relationship. We talk every now and then, keep in touch. But he reached out and he said, "Hey, would you ever want to get into coaching?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's something I've thought about, And then it went from a text message to a call, and he said, "Hey, how serious are you about coaching?" I said, "Well, Skip, where I'm at right now, like the hardest thing for me would be deciding I'm done. I got to gauge interest from my agent, see if other teams are going to be calling me, because I feel like I can still play. If the other teams think I can still play, I got to keep going." And he totally respected that. And I told him, with coaching, I made the minor league grind and the climb once. I don't know if I can do it again with a family of four. It's just going to be really hard to, see them, do all that. And he said, "Well, if there's a big league coaching opportunity, would you interview for it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd interview for it. Like that's something that I've dreamed about doing ever since I was playing." And yeah, he said, "Reach out to your agent, gauge some interest, and call me back." So hopped on the phone with my agent, asked him what it would be like. He said it'd be similar to what I did last year, kind of being a stopgap, week here for a team, 2 weeks with this team. And he said, "If you want to do that, that's great. But if there's a big league opportunity for you to interview with coaching and you want to do coaching in the future, you don't want to let this opportunity pass up because it might not be there next year." So yeah, talked about it with my wife, talked about it with the kids, and they were all for it. So called Skip back and said, "Let's get this interview going."
How do you think it's going to be to relate? Obviously, you're going to be able to relate with guys that you've been playing with or played for and played against and all whatever. How's that going to be, do you think? And how do you prepare for that? To know you're in a different role. You're actually a coach, but you're still kind of a cohort as well.
Yep. So to me, that was kind of the biggest hurdle that I had to think about and process. And it just kind of hit me, are these guys going to be able to respect me? I was in the clubhouse with them. I won with them. Are they going to be able to respect me as a coach and have a mutual respect where, I am only 34 years old? And it hit me, that respect was won in 23 and 24. They saw my work ethic. They saw me, kind of help Evan out, right, in 23, help Wyatt out in 24. And these are the guys who they're taking my job. So if they can see me willing to, help these younger guys who are nipping at my heels, taking playing time away from me, and I got to imagine that their respect is going to be there from an entire clubhouse, knowing that, wow, Janko did this when he was playing. Let's see what he's going to do as a coach. So that was definitely a concern of mine. Am I going to be able to relate to these guys as a coach instead of just a player now? And then I was like, well, shoot, I've been kind of coaching for 2.5 years now. Now I just have a title.
Man, I appreciate it. I look forward to having you around again, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
Kennedy.
Hi, Travis. What do you remember about meeting Skip for the first time? He mentioned spring training 16 in San Diego. Looking back at that time period, what do you remember about all of that?
Yeah, so I was the young pup. That was actually my first big league spring training, and Skip was a veteran. The one thing that I still tell people to this day is Skip taught me how to be a professional. He taught me what work looks like in, the weight room, what it looks like to get ready for spring training, and how to carry yourself and go about your business on a daily basis as a professional. His intensity sticks out, as I'm sure you guys can see. Very intense guy, and his eagerness to win. I don't know if Skip cares about many other things in life besides probably his family more than just winning games and winning baseball and creating a winning culture. So, yeah, that to me really sticks out. The intensity, the professionalism, the attention to detail. And, then once he got into coaching and he was my first base coach, his attention to detail, base running was kind of Skip's little caveat, his niche. And part of me taking this job was with the understanding that, Skip, I'm going to need to lean on you a little bit. Like I understand I'm not asking you to do my job, but I have a great relationship with Skip, have, a great relationship with Griff, who's going to be in the bullpen, great relationship with Rags, all of which were going to be assisting me kind of get my feet wet and help me out when issues arise or when I get stuck a little bit in the mud. So the comfort level's there. I'm excited. And yeah, I know I got some really good people who really care about winning to help me out as I get into this.
And I mean, have you always known you wanted to be a coach eventually, or was this like as you got to the end of your career, you're like, oh, that's something I could do?
I would say it probably started in 2021. In 2021, I was with the Phillies, did make the opening day roster, so I went to AAA. And at that point in my career, I was thinking, well, geez, I'm approaching 30. I'm a fourth outfielder. I better start leaning into some guys, at the alt site, in AAA because it was still the COVID impact. So I started leaning into guys and trying to help them out. Mickey Moniak, Nick Maton, guys like this who were down at the alt site. I was just trying to help them out. And it wasn't so much as like a coaching mentorship. It was just like hey, I'm a veteran. This is going to be my last year. I really want to enjoy this. Let me give back a little bit. Realized then how much I liked it and how much these guys kind of fed into it and kind of, ate it up. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And then 2 weeks later, I got called up, so I couldn't really help them out. And Mickey and Nick were up and down. So when they would come up, I was someone to lean on. But that's when it really hit me that coaching is probably in my future. And then everyone that I've talked with outside the game has always said, when you're done playing, you need to think about getting into coaching because you have a really good personality for it. You're really approachable. You're always positive. So yeah, and like I said, this opportunity came up, and I realized this might be what I've been praying for and hoping to make crystal clear in the off season to know if I should keep playing or not.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Travis, what does Skip want? Has he given you any idea on the bases? His teams in Miami were aggressive on the bases. The Rangers teams 23 even on the bases were really, really good. You've got some speed and some pedigree there. How important is that going to be to the 26 Rangers?
Yeah, I think the word that keeps coming up with Skip and I is aggressive. I like to throw in intelligently aggressive. You only get 27 outs in a baseball game. We realize that outs are precious, but at the same time, we need to take advantage of each and every 90 feet that we can advance. Again, there's the break even rates, the good decisions, the bad decisions, but I want the players coming in to be ultra aggressive in spring. Let's figure out how aggressive we can be without sacrificing that intelligent aspect of it. I'm all for making mistakes in spring on the aggressive side. I think Skip's all for that as well. Let's see how aggressive we can be. And it's one of those things, the more 90s we can win, the extra 90 feet that we can gain. My goal as a first base coach, base running, coordinator, helping those guys out is to make our hitting coaches look really good, right? Like let's have as many opportunities with guys in scoring position as possible, and let's score as many runs as possible being created on the base paths. Obviously you still have to drive them in, but let's give them the opportunity to make these hitting coaches look incredibly, perfect and like the best hitting coaches in the game.
What you were around Wyatt in 24 in spring training, and there are all these concerns about his defense, and then lo and behold, this year he's a Gold Glove finalist. Were you able to monitor his development as an outfielder, and what have you seen that makes you think, hey, this guy can play out there?
Well, he's only been playing outfield for probably 3 years. He was a catcher in college. He's never been out there. So obviously there's going to be some growing pains. If you would have asked me, in 2025, is he going to be a Gold Glove finalist? I probably would have said, probably not. But then you see behind the scenes, you see his work ethic, you see how much he cares about defense and how much he cares about getting better. And it's actually not surprising. The guy works his butt off. He's incredibly talented. And I think with Wyatt, he's a natural athlete, right? You could put Wyatt at third base and say, hey, figure it out. 6 months, he's going to be probably a Gold Glove finalist because he cares, he's dedicated to his craft, and he wants to get better. So yeah, with Wyatt, it's, for me, what I want Wyatt to do, I want to be more aggressive on the bases. I think he could easily be a 30-30 guy. I don't think 40-40 is out of the question. So I really want to get Wyatt to be more aggressive. And a lot of that too is I don't know how much Wyatt has ever stolen bases in his career. He's in the big leagues. He got called up incredibly quick to the big leagues. He handled it very well. But I haven't looked at his college stats, but I'd imagine he wasn't a base stealer in college. So, I think that's a guy who I can really help out with the mental side of stealing bases and really get that maybe hesitation that he has right now, that reserve that he has right now, to just free him up and just run, get out there and, depending on the situation, hey, this is a great time to take a chance and steal a base.
How comforting is it going to be to you and the family to know that you're not going to be on the waiver wire, that that you're not going to be picking up and leaving in a couple weeks, and that you're going to get to stay in one spot?
That is a huge relief. There's only been one time, and that was in 2024, where I figured, wow, I'll probably be here the whole year, and that's over an 11-year career. So that's happened for me one time. And even then I got put on the waiver wire and I was like, oh my goodness, you've got to be kidding me. But yeah, it's incredibly comforting for that factor. And just to come into a clubhouse where the guys already know me, the coaches, a ton of those coaches I've either played with or in the minor leagues played for. So these guys are good guys. There's not going to be a 6-week learning curve in spring training of figuring out personalities. It's going to be smooth sailing. It's going to be good. The guys I don't know, I can pay more attention to and get to know them more on a personal level. But for the guys who I already know, they already know me, and we'll hit the ground running.
Perfect. Thanks, bud.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Travis. Jeff asked about Wyatt, so I'll ask about the other young outfielder you got to know well while you were here. With Evan, always been a challenging 2 years for him with the injuries and trying to stay on the field. But in terms of his defense and the base running, he's an important part of maybe what this team wants to do. Kind of as you head into this next year, with him, getting to work with him in a different role, what do you think 2026 looks like for him after these last couple of years?
Yeah, I hope I hope that I can get Evan to open up to me a little bit about injuries because I haven't had the healthiest career. You know, I've gone through injuries, I've battled injuries. I know the mental toll that can take on you. So hopefully he can use me as kind of an outlet in that aspect as well. But as far as for Evan in 2026, it's along the same lines as Wyatt. You know, Evan got called up quick. You know, he made a huge impact for us in 23. Huge reason why we won that World Series. His talent is through the charts. I think a lot of it, again, is the mentality. You know, I think Evan could be a little passive at times, a little just not as aggressive as I'd like to see him. I want to see Evan make mistakes in spring so that we can learn, okay, Evan, this is where our line is for aggressiveness, right? And then, you know, making the mistakes, it's great. You know, to me, I think I was a guy who learned from my mistakes probably more than anyone because I made more mistakes than anyone, you know. And it's one of those things where in spring training, I didn't really care about my numbers, even though I was trying to make a team, because I was always trying to push the envelope. Okay, can I steal a base on a 1-3? You know, can I make this diving catch? You know, and then diving into the analytics behind that. How was my jump? How was my pre-pitch? Why didn't I get to this ball? Why was I thrown out on that pitch? You know, so that there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that goes into stealing bases. It's not just speed, you know. So it's I'm excited to work with Evan. Again, he's young. He wants to learn. You know, I know that from playing with him. He's incredibly curious about learning and getting better. And I think just giving him some more mental tips and breaking down some stuff for him at you know not elementary level, but at a base stealing mentality level where it's just learning, you know. I think that's really going to help him grow and steal bases and really take his game to the next level.
Thanks, Travis.
Anything else before we let Travis go?
How do you feel about El Blondie?
Well, I'm just hoping with Skip with the shaved head, he's not making me shave mine too. So hopefully that's not a coaching, you know, requirement.
Third base coach is bald too, so maybe you do.
No, well, I was thinking maybe if I do have to cut it, I'll just make wigs for them and they can wear it, you know.
All right, we'll leave it there. Very strong finish. Thanks, Trav. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Can't wait to see you all in Texas.